Forward. Hello, dear reader. My name is Benjamin Nelson. I'm a game design graduate and a fan of the Ori series. Ever since completing Ori and the Will of the Wisps back in 2020, I've been thinking about where the series could continue from there. Specifically, I've been conceptualizing a third Ori game, including gameplay, design, characters, and story. This project serves as both a writing exercise and as a way for me to play around with certain themes and ideas from my Ori 3 concept, and see what the community thinks of them. This fanfiction has been written in such a way that it aligns with the main canon, and does not conflict with it, as far as I know. Note that this story takes place after Will of the Wisps, and will expand on that game's ending and its implications. So if you have not beaten that game and do not wish to be spoiled, you should stop reading or listening now. Everyone else, please enjoy and share your feedback. This is the first story I've ever written and published, so I expect it to be a little rusty, and I want to improve. Thank you. Tales of Niwen, Chapter 1, The Item. Gore didn't expect to wake up on the floor. The sun was only just beginning to peek through the forest canopy, casting a warm orange glow through the window. Gore sat up and brushed the dust off his face. He had fallen out of his bunk, presumably in the middle of the night, and then continued to sleep until the sun began to shine across the floor. He wasn't an early bird, and tended to sleep through the morning, only waking in the afternoon. That is, unless someone needed him to lift something for them. Blinking the sand from his eyes, he stood up and stretched, letting out a loud yawn. Gore was a guardian spirit, a small, glowing bipedal mammal. Not exactly, but that was the closest classification, with hooved feet and big pointy ears. He was shorter and stouter than most spirits. The same applied to the pair of frills on his head. Among the spirits of Niwen's Wellspring Glade, Gore was particularly strong. He could lift loads that most spirits couldn't even budge with little effort. This came with a cost, though, as he needed a lot more food than most spirits. Hobbling over to the nearest stool, he sat down. What day was it again? It had seemed like spring had just started yesterday, when it had actually just ended. Gore leaned back in his stool and closed his eyes. It didn't matter what day it was. Nothing ever really happened in the glade. Everyone lived peaceful lives with plentiful food and clean water. Disease was rarely ever an issue, same with wild animals. Life in the glade was calm, boring bliss, and that was just the way he liked it. Gore was on the floor again. He had leaned back so far he'd fallen off the stool. Rubbing his bruised head, he stood back up, only to bonk it on a shelf. With a groan, he carefully stepped out from underneath the shelf and into the center of the room. Suddenly, he remembered something. A minor concussion must have knocked loose a memory. A few days ago, he was approached by Sir, the lead guardian of the glade, and asked to help with an expedition. Meet me in the center of the village at sunrise. I will need your help with this expedition. The expedition was today. Good thing I fell out of bed, Gore thought. Sir was not a spirit you'd want to get on the bad side of. He could only imagine the lecture he would have gotten if he'd stayed asleep. Still a little dizzy, he stumbled across the room. A bunch of sacks filled with fruits and grains lay in a heap in one corner. One of them was open. Reaching in, he pulled out a small orange fruit, his favorite. Then he reached back in and grabbed another, and then another, continuing till he could hardly carry any more. Carefully holding the fruit in one arm, he picked one up and ate it in a single bite. It tasted like citrus and sunshine. Picking up another to snack on, he headed out the front door. The glade was particularly quiet today, aside from the constant chirping of birds and the croaking of frogs. It seemed that most of the residents were still in their homes. With Sir's request fresh in his mind, Gore started walking towards the village square in the center of the glade, passing over a set of bridges and past the storage hut. In the distance stood the spirit tree, a bastion of health and good fortune. The spirit tree ensured that the local ecosystem remained healthy, casting its mystical light across the land. The elders of the glade said that the spirit tree was once a spirit themselves, who gave their life to restore the land of Niwen after being ravaged by the decay for decades. Gore had been born from the tree, as with every spirit in the glade, and as such, it was his job to protect and serve the spirit tree, though, considering it couldn't talk, the latter was a bit more difficult. Gore didn't think about these things much. He just sat around, ate fruit, and helped people when he was asked. He wasn't very ambitious at all, unlike a certain spirit in the glade, who, speaking of which, was just coming into view. In the center of the village stood a large wooden cart, next to which were two spirits in a heated argument. One wore a white scarf and had tufts of fur on the ends of their ears and tail. The other had an especially long tail, and was clad in metal armor, which was rarely seen on a spirit. As I have already told you, we are headed out on an expedition. It is too dangerous for you to come. I'll be fine, I got both you and your excellent training backing me up. Nico, the decision is final. You are needed here to watch over the glade in my absence. Come on, when has the glade ever been attacked? That's enough, Nico. A voice echoed from overhead. On a suspended wooden platform overlooking the square stood an older spirit, with 4 frills on their head. The 2 inner frills were slightly longer than the outer ones, and almost looked like they were wearing a crown. You have been given a direct order, the spirit continued, and should be honored to take the role as guardian of the glade. Nico fidgeted with his scarf. Fine, but I want to go on the next Gorlek expedition. The armored spirit let out a sigh. Very well, but I don't want any funny business until the expedition. And, they continued, during the expedition. Nico gave a mischievous grin. Don't worry, I'll save all my shenanigans till after we're all back safe. Gore stepped up to the pair of spirits, still shoveling fruit into his mouth. Gore, the armored spirit began. I was worried I'd have to drag you out of bed. Remember our mission today, yes? Gore dumped his remaining handful of fruit into the wooden cart. Yeah, I do. Any reason in particular why we gotta leave so early? The armored spirit frowned. At least, they probably did. Their face wasn't visible behind the helmet's visor. This is the same time everyone normally wakes up. We just want to make sure you're back before dark, that's all, spoke the spirit on the balcony. Gore frowned in confusion. The mission they were tasked with was retrieving an item of interest. What the item was, he wasn't told. Only Sir, the spirit in armor, knew. But considering they were given a cart and an entire day to retrieve it, it must be very large and very heavy. Explains why they needed me, he thought. The sound of a door shutting brought Gore's attention away from the cart. 2 people had just exited their home. A pair of Moki, one of which was very pregnant. Good morning, everyone, they said in unison, one trailing behind the other slightly. The Moki were natives of the glade. Naive, but curious. They resembled a lemur. One could mistake their silhouette for spirits, albeit without the hooves or frills. Good morning, you two, said Sir, taking a step towards the couple. I'm glad to see you are in good health. The Moki both smiled, the future mother brushing away one of her ears with her hand. You as well, sir, said the future father. It seems a bit early to go foraging. We still have plenty of fruit from last time. We aren't going foraging, Bao, replied Sir, voice echoing from inside her helmet. You aren't, said Bao, blinking in confusion. What are you doing with that cart, then? Sir stood up straight, folding her arms behind her back to look disciplined, which she was. I'm afraid I cannot disclose that to you, she replied, her voice as monotone as ever. Disclothes? The Moki said in unison, tilting their heads in confusion. Ah, Sir stammered, her posture softening a bit. I mean, I can't tell you what we're doing. It's a secret. The Moki looked at each other excitingly. A secret? Oh, we love secrets, especially when they aren't secrets anymore. Well, she replied, you'll be happy to know it won't be a secret much longer. You'll see when we return. Gore shuffled his feet around. Why was it a secret? He had just assumed that everyone knew about their mission. After all, everyone in the glade were great neighbors, always sticking their noses in each other's business. The community was very tightly knit. By the way, Kika, said Sir, turning towards the pregnant Moki, have you two decided on a name for your pup? Well, she began. We cannot disclose that to you, slipped in Bao, standing up straight, mimicking Sir. You'll just have to wait, smiled Kika, her eyes sparkling with mischief. They had no idea. Sir, called a voice from overhead. The 4-frilled spirit was peering down onto the group again. You got a job to do. Please don't waste daylight. Yes, Vale, responded Sir, placing a closed fist over her heart in salute. I sincerely apologize for my gross incompetence. Her face was still hidden under the helmet. Sure, responded Vale, squinting his eyes slightly. Keep an eye on Gore, okay? And Gore, Vale continued, turning to the spirit. Sir's in charge during the expedition. You do what she asks, all right? Gore responded with a thumbs up. His mouth was full of more fruit. Vale nodded, turning away from the group. He had plenty of work to do himself. Let us be off, Gore, spoke Sir. We can't take the direct route because of the cart, so we'll have to go the long way. Gore nodded, swallowing the last of his fruit, and lifted the cart with its handles. As the two of them walked out of the village, Sir turned back to the pair of Moki and waved. Pleasant tidings! We'll see you again this evening, she called. raising her visor slightly so her voice would carry. The Moki waved back, one of them calling, "What's it hiding?" Sir lowered her visor and turned toward the open trail. Hopefully this will be easy, she thought. They'd been walking for a few hours when Sir suddenly stopped and raised her hand. "We're here." Gore put down the cart and stretched, looking at his surroundings. They had traveled a fair distance, passing through Corlock's Hollow, and now stood at the edge of the silent woods. A cold wind blew over him and he shivered. This was a bad place. The silent woods were cursed, most of its inhabitants long dead. Only monsters and unknowable horrors were there now. Gore wrapped his arms around himself to stay warm and stepped towards Sir. "So," he started, "what are we here for? I don't see anything remotely interesting." "Up there," she responded, pointing above them. Suspended under a cliff was a small round hut, much like those found in the glade. No light shone from within it. "I'm not carrying that whole thing," Gore said defiantly. "We aren't taking the whole thing," Sir responded, lifting her visor to get a better look. "Vale didn't tell me exactly what we're retrieving. He just said that I would know it when I see it," she continued. Again with the vagueness, Gore thought. Vale usually gave orders in excruciating detail. This wasn't like him. "I'll need a boost," said Sir, lowering her visor and turning towards Gore. He shuffled uncomfortably, before letting out a sigh. "Just try to be gentle, okay?" She nodded. Gore squatted down low and covered his head with his arms. He was not a fan of doing this. Sir took several steps back, before breaking into a sprint towards him. She leapt, her legs tensioned like a spring, arms behind her back and tail bent into a zigzag. For a moment she seemed to hang in midair, directly over him. Then with a loud thump, she kicked off Gore and sailed into the air. The force of the leap knocked him off his feet. He had eaten dirt 3 times today. Sir somersaulted through the air, landing gracefully next to the door of the hut. She turned back toward Gore, finding him face down in the grass. "Are you all right, Gore?" "Urgh," he responded, getting up on his knees. "Someone needs to teach you the meaning of gentle," he called up at her. "My apologies," she called back down, before turning to face the door. "I'm going to have a look inside. Once I've secured the item, we'll lower it down onto the cart. Sound good?" "Yeah, if you're gentle and don't drop it on me. It's got to be heavy if we need the cart." "My thoughts exactly," she replied, opening the creaky door and stepping inside. The door shut with a thud, and Gore was left alone, right next to the silent woods, with nobody to protect him. He shook his head, sat down on the ground and leaned up against the cart. Worrying wasn't going to help anyone. If he was in trouble, he needed only to shout, and Sir would come flying out of the hut to his rescue. Gore closed his eyes and listened to the forest ambiance. It was dead silent. I probably should have expected that, he thought. He bolted to his feet, ears perked and tail puffed out. He scanned his surroundings carefully. What made that noise? He didn't see anything. There it was again. It was loud and very close. Gore lifted a large stone nearby and put the cart to his back. He wasn't going to go down easily. "Over there, movement near that bush." He tensed and adjusted his grip on the stone, eyes darting left and right. He had seen movement, right? The rock was starting to feel heavy. He was still holding it over his head with both hands. If he had only eaten recently, then he would have the strength to chuck the rock a country mile. Anything hit by a stone of this size at that speed would have their bones shattered. Gore shifted his weight around and continued to search for threats. He had only eaten this morning and was starting to feel very hungry. Wait. Gore looked down at his belly. The sound was coming from there. Sheepishly, he lowered the rock back down and placed it onto the ground. Thank goodness no one had seen his little freak out. Nika would have never let him live it down if he knew about it. He sat down again, this time on top of the rock, and rubbed his stomach. There would probably be soup waiting for him back at the glade when he returned. Until then, he would have to tough it out, unless he wanted to try his hand at foraging. Knowing my luck, I'd probably eat something poisonous, he thought. Gore looked up towards the hut. Sir was taking her sweet time up there. She's probably having trouble finding what we're after, he thought. After all, Vale hadn't told them what they were looking for, only that she would know it when she saw it. Gore moved off the rock back to the grass. It hadn't been very comfortable. With a sigh, he flopped onto his back and gazed up into the forest canopy. The sun was nearly at its apex, and would soon shine directly from above, just in time to blind him. He closed his eyes. At least he would get to bathe in the sun while he waited. He had been shivering not too long ago. Lying there on the grass, his thoughts began to drift. The day of rebirth was approaching, the anniversary of when the spirit tree first sprouted. It would be in about 6 weeks or so. Gore didn't care much for it, except for all the food, songs, and celebration it brought. It was always a day full of energy, and Vale always made sure to put on a good show. Rumor had it that this year he had something special planned. It must be hard, he thought. Vale was the first spirit born from the spirit tree, so he was viewed as the leader. Everyone always came to him with their problems, and he always fixed them. He knew so much about everything, probably because of all the time he spent in the Wellspring Library. Sir had said it wasn't uncommon for her to find him passed out in a pile of books when they were young. It hadn't helped that the library's caretaker, Ofer, had always encouraged him to gain more knowledge, even after training him and Sir in combat. It had been several minutes now since Sir disappeared into the mysterious hut, and there still hadn't been a peep from inside. Gore opened his eyes, preparing to sit up, only to immediately close them again from the sun blinding him. With a grunt, he stood up, making sure to face directly ahead before opening his eyes. What was taking her so long? "Hey, sir, everything okay up there?" he called. No response. He shuffled around nervously before shouting again. "You're not dead, are you? 'Cause I don't know the way home." Silence. Gore began to pace back and forth, racking his brain. What was he going to do? He couldn't climb up there, he had never learned how. In fact, he had never learned any spirit skills like the ones Sir had used earlier. He was so strong that he never needed to use any before. The sound of a door creaking brought Gore out of his thoughts. The door to the hut was open again, and a familiar face, no, a familiar helmet, was peering down at him. "Sorry for the delay, Gore," she called. "It's just—" Sir paused. "This is going to be more difficult than I thought," she called. "What, did you not find it yet?" Gore hollered back. "No, I did, but—" She paused again. "It's very heavy and has an awkward shape." Gore furrowed his brow and called back up. "Well, is there anything up there that can help you? Like a rope or something?" "I'm not sure. I'll have another look around." Sir turned and closed the door with a thud, leaving Gore staring up at the soon-to-be vacant hut. A minute or so passed before her voice came from within the hut again. "All right, I found something. Give me another minute." The sound of something scraping against an old wooden floor echoed from the hut. The item was indeed very heavy. Gore flicked his tail. Images of what it could be danced through his head. A giant hunk of Gorlek ore, perhaps? Maybe a stockpile of spirit shards. Vale had always treasured those. The scraping noise stopped, and Sir's voice shone down from the trees again. I think I'm going to have to remove the door." That's weird, Gore thought. If it couldn't fit through the door, how was it put in the house to begin with? Maybe the house was built around it? No, that didn't make sense. The house was suspended off the ground on a platform. Why would anybody raise something on a platform into the air and then build a house around it? He shook his head. He'd see what it was soon enough. With a loud crack, a large spectral hammer came smashing through the door, causing Gore to jump in surprise. There was Sir again, her touch as soft as ever. With a few more swings, the door came flying off its hinges, plummeting to the forest floor and crushing those that found themselves beneath it. Thankfully, he wasn't one of them. Sir came back into view again, dragging a rope behind her. The rope was wrapped thoroughly around a large object that had been covered with a cloth. Gore squinted. It certainly was an unusual shape. He could roughly make out 3 masses beneath the cloth. Sir put down the rope and stretched, letting out a loud groan. "Do you think," she gestured towards the heap, "do you think you can handle this?" Gore shrugged. "I won't know till I try. It doesn't seem fragile, does it?" "No," she called back. "But She looked at the mass again. "I don't want to risk breaking it. Not under any circumstances." "Well," he called back, "I want to make it back in time for supper, so let's just go for it." Sir looked back at the item and shouted down to Gore. "All right, just be careful, and don't hurt yourself. You still haven't learned regeneration yet." Yeah. Sir picked up the end of the rope and slung it over a hanging tree root above her head. The tip fell through the air, landing at Gore's feet. He picked it up, took a deep breath, and braced himself. "All right, let me have it." She began to push the payload over the edge of the platform, slowly letting more weight onto Gore before the heap tumbled over the edge, lifting Gore off his feet and into the air. It had happened so fast he hadn't had any time to react. He watched as the treasure they had worked so hard for plummeted to the ground. In an instant, Sir was there beside him, gripping onto the rope to increase the counterweight. Their ascent slowed, and the payload hit the floor with a loud thud. The two of them were left dangling several stories off the forest floor. Gore stammered, his feet flailing beneath him. What now? Hang on. Sir began to swing back and forth, building momentum until they both landed back on the platform. Gore dropped onto his knees, thankful to have something solid underneath him again. Sir turned and knotted the rope on itself before turning back towards him. Are you all right? She asked, her voice a soft, gentle tone. Gore exhaled and stood up. Yeah, that was just a lot, he answered. She stood there for a moment, still looking at him. All right, well, let's get headed back. There'll be soup waiting for us. She climbed back onto the rope before sliding back down to the forest floor. Gore lingered for a moment, turning towards the opening that was once a door. There were baskets strewn across the interior of the hut. An old table stood under a loft filled with rotten straw bedding. This had been someone's home. He turned away and began climbing back down the rope. Whoever the hut belonged to, they were long gone. Gore slid back down into the forest floor, finding Sir untangling the rope from the mystery item, which was still covered by a cloth. Can you go get the cart, please? He nodded and ran over to the cart. Taking a handle in each hand, he started wheeling it back towards Sir. She was peering under the cloth with her visor raised when he arrived. What are you doing? He asked. Just checking for any damage, she replied, wiping her eyes with her hand and closing her visor once more. Can I see? He asked, reaching toward the cloth. No. He stopped. He didn't expect such a firm no from her. Why couldn't he see it? Was it really that secretive? Vale had kept the expedition secret, even withholding information from himself and Sir. Gore shrugged. You're the boss. Sir braced herself and pushed the payload up onto the cart. All right, let's head back. With a grunt, Gore picked up the cart and started pulling it toward the glade. The glade is this way, Gore. It was a good thing he had Sir with him. The return trip hadn't been any trouble. Aside from a few pesky skeetos, which Sir had quickly dispatched, the village square was quiet. Most of the villagers were having supper at the soup cauldron. Strangely, the square was filled with supplies. Grains, dried fruit, textiles, furniture, the works. It was all piled up in a somewhat organized heap. Vale, we're back! Where do you want this, thing? Gore hollered. Wait. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Sir. Show some discretion. He kept this a secret for a reason. Oh yeah, he replied sheepishly. He was ready to finish the job and go gorge himself on soup. Vale emerged from behind the heap of supplies and approached them. He seemed tired. Good to see you both unharmed, he said, smiling. Walking up to the cart, he peered under the cloth at the mystery item they'd spent the day retrieving. We did get what you wanted, right? You didn't give us a description of it or anything, and I do not want to trek all the way back there. Vale lowered the cloth and nodded. You got it. Sorry for the secrecy. He turned and locked eyes with Sir. She had been on edge the entire trip back, and was still tense even though they were safely back in the glade. Thank you for doing this, he said to her. She nodded. Guess I don't get any thanks, even though I lugged this thing the whole way here, Gore thought. Right, Vale continued. Follow me. We'll be putting it in the storage hut. That explained all the supplies in the square. They'd been moved out of storage. Gore glanced at the heap as he walked past. It was far bigger than the item on the cart. Did they really need all that storage space cleared out just to fit one thing? The three of them crossed the wooden bridge leading to the storage hut. Its door had been propped open and there were scuff marks on the threshold. Vale had clearly just dragged everything out of it. Let's unload it right here, Vale said, standing right outside the door. With a grunt, Gore tipped the cart up, and the two others slid the payload off and into the doorway. Placing the cart back down, he stretched, letting out a loud groan. He was ready to be finished. Vale and Sir looked at him expectantly. Gore sighed and braced himself against the large mystery object. Just push it straight ahead, commanded Vale. The three spirits braced and, with a series of grunts, pushed the object through the door until it was up against the back wall. Gore stood up straight and glanced at Vale, hoping to be dismissed so he could finally eat something. Sir was shifting her weight around. She couldn't seem to hold still. All right, Vale huffed, stretching his back. He knelt back down and began loosening the rope keeping the cloth on the item. Gore took a step forward. So, what is it? It's best if I just show you, Vale replied, uncoiling the last bit of rope and tossing it aside. But it's nothing to be happy about. Vale stood back up and grabbed the cloth with both hands. He hesitated, then pulled the cloth away in dramatic fashion. Sir looked away. Gore's heart jumped into his throat. In front of them stood 3 Moki, a father, a mother, and a pup. Their cold, lifeless eyes stared back at the spirits. They had been turned to stone. Gore took a step back towards the door, only to bump into something. With a yelp, he jumped back and whirled around. "Ah, you found them." A voice echoed through the hut. In the doorway stood another Moki, older and with a walking stick. A sharp fang hung from a string tied around their neck. They looked rather intimidating for a Moki. "Mock," spoke Vale, turning to face the intruder. Gore was too stunned to move or speak. The elder Moki walked past him towards the petrified family. "I'm glad," he began, "that at the very least they can finally be at home in the glade." Gore snapped out of his funk and looked around. He had only now just noticed that the storage hut was furnished. He stammered. "What the heck is this? Who are they?" He pointed towards the statue. "They," Vale began, "are victims." He turned to face Gore. "Of the decay." He shuddered. Gore knew that the decay was dangerous, that it sapped life from the world, twisted creatures into vile forms, and drove animals mad. But turned people to stone? "You didn't tell them?" Mock asked, turning to face Vale. "I thought..." He paused. "I thought it would be easier if they didn't know." He glanced at Sir, who was still shifting around uncomfortably. "Well, they were going to learn once it is finished," Mock replied. "Tell me," he continued, turning to face Gore, "what do you know about the history of the glade?" Gore racked his brain. "This land was once ridden with the decay, but a lone spirit gave their life to banish it. That's all I remember. Their name was Ori." Vale jumped in, giving him a look of disapproval. "Yes," Mock continued, "but Ori did far more than just that. They collected materials and built homes, helping everyone with anything, no matter how insignificant." He touched the fang hanging around his neck. "Ori even built this hut," Mock exclaimed, gesturing at their surroundings. "It was built as a new home for a Moki father." He turned back towards the statue. "But it never saw use." Gore peered at the statue again, his hair still on end. "When Ori was sent to fetch the rest of the family, they only returned with this." Mock held out a small, stuffed Moki doll. It was worn and missing an eye. He stepped forward and placed the doll next to the petrified Moki pup. "The father left the glade and returned to his family. He wanted to be with them, no matter what." Sir had turned to face the wall, visor raised. "I never met them," Mock continued. "I didn't even know their names, but I thought..." He paused. "I thought that after all this time, they deserved a place in the glade." Gore looked down at the floor, trying to process everything he was just told. "Please don't tell anyone about this for now," Vale pleaded to the 3 of them. "I want to make this home into a memorial, but it isn't ready yet." Sir nodded. Her visor was back down. "Yeah, of course," Gore responded. "Can I leave now?" "You are all dismissed, and thanks for helping Mock and I," Vale replied. One by one, they left the hut. First Gore, then Mock, and finally Sir. Vale was left alone. He turned back toward the family of Moki and knelt down. "This is why," he thought. "This is why I exist. Why I must give everything." Then, without a word, he stood up and walked out the door back into the twilight.